Sanibonani Dumelang, beautiful people. It is your girl, Nthabiseng Mabuya, here again. And before we even start with this episode, I'd like to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Festive. I know we're in 2025, but I did not wish you guys a blessed festive season. And in this new year, I pray for abundance, I pray for favor, I pray for mercy and for grace over your life. May God just multiply every portion that your heart desires. And yeah, man, this is a year of yes. This is a year of open doors, this is a year of opportunities, and utilize them to the best of your ability. And this is a year for personal investment, guys. Like, just make sure that this is a personal year for you. It is intentional. You are intentional with yourself. You're intentional with every opportunity presented to you, so that you can grow as an individual. So yes, to introduce today's episode, I've been getting a lot of requests on email, on Instagram. You guys are fetching me on socials, hey? So yes, I've been getting a lot of DMs rather when it comes to the IAC, formerly known as the ITC. You guys requested that I make a video on how I passed my ITC on first attempt, as well as any tips on how to study and prepare yourself for this exam. And I know a few things have changed, and if you're unaware of them, just go to the SAICA website. It'll give you all the information that you need about this exam. And yeah, this is basically going to be me answering the frequently asked questions on email and the DMs that you guys have been sending, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability and give you tips as I go. So yes, let's get into the questions. The first one that I got asked was, describe your ITC journey and when you started studying. That's a tricky one, because number one, I told myself that after CTA, I need to take a break from studying because I was fatigued. I did not even want to see like a standard. I did not want to see a question. I didn't want to see anything because CTA just took a lot from me that year. So that December, I didn't study. I told myself that I need to take a break. And I had that mentality of, hey, if it does not go well, I still have 5 more attempts, which is not the good way to go because you need to give it your best. So January came. I was on the Gauteng board course, so we got those 2 thick files where it was filled with just past papers. Like, one file had accounting and taxation, and then the other one had auditing and finance. And in December, I did not touch a book. When it came to January, that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to be serious and start studying for ITC, because I did mine in 2022. So when it came to doing the board course, when I opened my laptop in January, they're like, okay, we are on class number 5 now. And I'm like, when did we get to number 1? Now I'm starting to panic because, I feel like people are ahead of me, and, I didn't know about the classes. I think I just switched off like completely from anything, accounting related. I didn't even want to know about any of that, but that was my mistake, obviously. And I just said, I lost track of time, but I still have 3 weeks left to study. And yeah, I started studying literally at the beginning of January. The moment everybody's like, yippee, Happy New Year, that's when I'm like, girl, now you need to start studying because this exam is coming soon. And basically, that's how that's when I started studying. And describing my journey, I would say, it was chilled. Well, I didn't stress about it, but I'm going to get into how I studied throughout when I get to other questions. So that's basically when I started studying. And then the second question is, how did you manage to study ITC and pass it on first attempt? Right? I got that question a lot, the first attempt one specifically. And the thing that I can say to you is, when it comes to accounting, when it comes to just board exams or any exam in any field, it's not about being smart. It's not about, being an A student. You pass by having consistent study patterns, investing in yourself in terms of your academics, like working hard, looking at your strengths and weaknesses and trying to perfect, your weaknesses and move it towards the strength side. And that's basically the approach that I followed. And one of the things that I decided to do was go back to my CTA notes. I literally had a table of context of all the topics we did in accounting, auditing, taxation, and finance. And I went through each one and I basically wrote a tick and a cross next to each one. So a tick meant I'm confident in this topic. I feel like I'm ready, right? This is my strength. And when I had a cross, I knew that I had to go back to this topic. So that was basically me creating a strength and weakness list for all modules. And having that strength and weakness list is very important, because imagine now you are only studying the things that you're good at and the things you're most confident in, and you're neglecting the ones that you don't like and the ones that are your weakness, because chances are they're going to come out in the paper. So what if the things you're good at is only 10% of the paper and 90% is the things that you neglected, right? It's better to know that I am weak in this topic and I need to perfect it. Because the mistake that I used to make even in CTA was running to question papers without understanding the basic principle of that topic. And obviously I'm going to get the questions wrong because I'm not understanding the gist of it. I'm not understanding the why. And I'm going to pull through the why concept. When you're studying, you need to ask yourself, why is it this way? Like, you need to understand the thought process behind it, because if you understand the why in every single topic, you will be able to answer the question. It doesn't matter whether they throw sticks and stones at you and whether they try to confuse you in the paper. It doesn't matter what approach they try to ask the question in. You will be ready regardless of the thing that is thrown at you. So just make sure that when you're studying, you're doing it intentionally. You're knowing the why behind each topic, and you are understanding the basic principle before running to the question. And another thing I forgot to mention, yes, I had the 2 thick files, but let me be honest now. I tried to write, it was an IFRS 15 question, accounting, because it wasn't my strongest point. I tried to look at that IFRS 15 question. I tried to answer it. Just by reading it, I got a headache. And I'm just like, you know what? This is not for me. I'm going to stress myself because I didn't study December. I only have a few weeks left to write the ITC. Let me not stress myself. Let me try to learn my notes and ignore the question papers, because I felt like I'm getting a headache and I'm just... I was getting stressed just by looking at that question. But then everybody's approach is different. If you study based on question papers, it's very good to do that because you know the standard that Psycho will set. So if you're comfortable in yourself, then you can do what I did in terms of revising your CTA notes and praying and hoping to God that you are understanding the basic principle of it and you are trusting in your knowledge. Then you will get carried through and pass the ITC. If you're not like me and you still want to practice question papers, there's nothing wrong with that. I actually encourage it because it actually gives you an idea of what to expect. So it depends on the person. And also, it's very difficult to try to apply what works for someone else in terms of in your life, because sometimes what works for you does not work for everybody else. So just find what works for you and stick to it, because you're running out of time, babes. And then the next question I got is, how do you study ITC using past papers? I think that's a very important question, because sometimes we tend to have this thing of, okay, I'm going to write, or I'm not going to write the paper, but I'm going to look at the question, read it, and then see what the answer is. And then in your head, you're going to think, oh yes, I know this. Oh yes, I would have answered it like this. Don't do that. Don't do that, because that's where you fool yourself. And that's where I was fooled into thinking that I know my work. Meanwhile, I don't. So I think when it comes to past papers, you need to actually complete the question to your best ability, and you write it according to the time allocated. If maybe that question is 30 marks, maybe you're going to allocate 15 minutes or 30 minutes to answer the question, and that's the amount of time you're going to take in the actual exam, then set a timer for yourself and say, I'm going to write it under exam pressure. I'm not going to write it while the TV's on or your phone is on or whatever, so that you can practice getting in that zone. Number one. Number two, after you're done writing, you need to be critical when you are marking yourself. Mark yourself with a critical eye and don't be lenient with yourself. Where you are wrong, you need to understand where you went wrong. And when you're wrong, you must say, okay, you must not say, oh yes, I would have gotten this, maybe I wasn't thinking now. Be honest with yourself and say, okay, I did not get this. Why did I not get this? Right? Try to understand your thought process. That, okay, the answer says this, the memo says this. Why did I go left instead of going in that direction? Because when you're seeing your response and when you're seeing the memo, you're able to see your thought process, and you're able to know, okay, when I was reading this is how I interpreted it. Maybe this is not what they wanted, because sometimes under pressure we tend to answer what we want instead of what is required from us. We have our own required in our heads, and that's how we lose marks. So you need to practice that skill under time pressure. So that's why I'm saying time yourself in terms of, okay, you're going to allocate 15 minutes for this. And then when you're marking, you make sure that you are critical and you are objective. When you're done marking, right, take your paper and then write down the questions you got wrong. If maybe it's a journal question, or maybe it's an IFRS 16 question, leases, or maybe it's a VAT question that you did not get right, then you're going to see, okay, VAT is your weakness. IFRS 16 I must go back to, and journal entries I must go back to. That is how you see the topics of that module that you need to basically reinforce in terms of your knowledge. Because remember, time is running out. You're not able to answer all the question papers in that file. And when you are marking your paper, that's how you're able to see what is your strength and what is your weakness, and then just go back to that thing that you got wrong. And the next question I got is, what is the study method for each module? That's a very good question, actually. So when it comes to each module, obviously we approach it differently. Like, for example, in accounting, I would say accounting has a similar approach to taxation. And the reason why I say this is because the structuring is the same. Because in accounting, you have the criteria of that standard. For that standard to be applicable, it needs to meet a set criteria. For example, if you're looking at IFRS 16, it is leases. In order for a contract to be a lease, there must be a criteria, that definition of a lease, that there must be an underlying asset. You must have a right to use the asset or direct the use of it for a specific period of time for that contract to be classified as a lease. So now, then you see that standard is applicable. But then, what do you do if it's applicable? Then you go to that structure of initial recognition and measurement. When you are determining that, okay, the right of use asset exists, the lease liability exists, how do you recognize it? How do you measure it, right? There's two types of things you need to measure, the right of use and the lease liability. So that's when you need to look at the standard to see, okay, at what cost are we measuring it? And then after that, in the initial year, we have subsequent measurement, right? So subsequent measurement is after the initial year, when you recognize it, after those years, what do you do basically to account for everything? So that's subsequent measurement. And then you have presentation and disclosure. That is the set structure even in your IFRS books. That is the set structure. So when you are studying, you need to know that, okay, for PPE, this is initial recognition and measurement, subsequent as well as presentation and disclosure. Everything in accounting, you study it in that format. And then for taxation, it is basically a similar approach. Instead of calling it a criteria, we call it a scope. So for the scope of Section 11A in the Income Tax Act to be applicable, that's general expenses, obviously the expense needs to be in the production of income and not of a capital nature. So in order for that section to be applicable, that is the criteria of it. Then, after stating that, you need to apply that section to the facts of the case that are presented to you, right? You need to be able to say, okay, this type of expenditure is capital in nature, therefore it cannot be deductible under Section 11A. You need to state why. And in you practicing this approach, It's you basically practicing how you're going to even answer in the exam, because you are basically tested on what is the tax implication of it. You need to tell SAICA the tax implication of certain items. And in order to do that, in order to practice that, you do it in your studying as well. Then when it comes to auditing for me, it was my weakness, but I think I got like a cheap method for it, right? So I looked at the line item. If you're dealing with line items, I looked at the line item, and then I'll ask myself, okay, is this a class of transaction or is it an account balance? If I determine either or, then I know, okay, maybe it is a class of transaction. Then I need to look at the assertions affected. Then I'll list all the assertions that are affected for this class of transaction. And then I'll say, okay, when I'm assessing the risk, what risk can apply with regards to this class of transaction? And this is when I'll say, okay, maybe cutoff can be an issue, or maybe completeness can be an issue, or accuracy can be an issue, right? Because of A, B, and C. And then after understanding what assertions can be affected and the risk thereof, then I'll assess that risk. And then after that, I'll have to obviously respond in terms of procedures. Then I'll start having, okay, basic procedures. There's certain general procedures that you can come up with, right? And they can be applicable to certain things, but you can change the wording around as long as you have the general procedures in your head, right? Because unfortunately, this is not like the APC where you can have, the procedures in your file and go in the exam with your file. The procedures have to be here. So every time you're practicing, you need to have procedures, but you need to know also what documents you need to work with. For example, if you're dealing with payments, anything that's got to do with payments, there are invoices, there are, those delivery notes, so it's something that you need to actually look at, the receipts and all of that. So you need to know, okay, for example, when you're studying, anything that's got to do with payments, these are the documents that I need. Anything that's got to do with PPE, these are the documents that I need, right? Anything that's got to do with any account balance, this is the documentation I need to look for. If I'm asked for external confirmation, this is my starting point. Bank confirmation, legal confirmation, all of these things. And that's something that you can basically practice and cram. Don't cram, but like have it in your head so that your go-to document is A, B, and C. That's something that helped me. And it helped me basically to remember the documentation and supporting evidence that we need. And then when it came to the test of controls, Shem, with that one, I'm not going to lie to you, sit down with your past paper and look for the controls and how to actually test controls for a business process. So what helped me was that I would look at the past papers to see how they responded. Like I would have examples of how to actually answer, and I'll document it. So I'll document each procedure because I'm a photographic person. If I see it, it goes in. So then if I see it and I say it, it even goes in further, like deeper in the head. So that's how it's studied. And when it comes to finance, right, I feel like finance is something that is practical. And I say practical because it's applicable to everyday life. Finance is basically them asking you for a decision, to make a decision that is best for the company. But in finance, whatever decision you are making, you need to be able to make a decision that is best for the company as well as its stakeholders, your shareholders, your suppliers, your consumers, your community, like everyone that is involved. They must not be harmed from the decision that you're making. And that is basically a strategic point of view. And when it comes to, the numbers, the costing and everything else, you need to be able to understand the story behind the numbers. For a capital budget and valuation question, it's not just about, drafting capital budget and that valuation. You need to understand why depreciation is not included. You need to understand why certain things are applied, certain principles applied. You need to understand relevant costing. Why is this cost relevant and why is this one not? If I'm considering two decisions, if maybe I'm earning interest at 10% for one decision and the same interest is earned for the second decision, why is that decision relevant? It's not, but why is it not relevant, right? You need to understand the story behind it, because sometimes in the exam they can give you a capital budget that's already there, and they say, okay, fully assess or evaluate this capital budget and tell me your thoughts. So in order to be able to do that, you must understand what a capital budget is. You need to understand the story behind the numbers. So it's not just about calculation. And of course, you're going to get principal marks, but you need to understand the principle and the fundamental basics of that specific topic in finance in order to get the principal marks. So I think, yeah, that is how I approached all 4 modules. And then I got a question that says how to answer a relevant costing question or a standard costing question. Yeah, I haven't done standard costing in a while. But with regards to relevant costing, the best way to master it is to ask yourself what additional cost am I incurring, right, to make this decision, as well as what cost am I saving as a result of that decision. So you look at the saving as well as the additional costing, right? Because the saving is basically saying that, okay, I don't have to spend this amount of money because of this decision, and the additional cost is me having to take additional expenses because of the decision, right? Maybe rent will increase because I want to produce more, or I want to export my goods instead. And then you must also consider something called opportunity cost, right? Because I am increasing my production in one division, that means another division might suffer because I need the labor resource from that division into division A. So instead of making 50,000 Rand in sales in division B, now I'm going to make less because I need their labor. That is an opportunity cost. So you need to consider such things. So I would say the things to consider in relevant costing is additional cost that you incur, cost that you save, as well as an opportunity cost, which is the potential revenue you would have made if you did not make this decision. And I hope I summarized that. And then with regards to standard costing, I haven't done that in a while, but I know what helped me when I was studying in the CTA was that I would literally sat down and I studied the methods. Those methods became my friend. Those methods, if I saw it, I wrote it out probably 1,000,000 times. I wrote it out and I said it out loud. So if I saw it, I said it. It cannot deep in my brain, right? So in any costing question, you need to understand the story behind the numbers. Ask yourself, why does standard costing exist? Number one, what is the purpose of standard costing? And also this method, why am I using this method instead of another one, right? Try to ask yourself, okay, in this scenario, which method is applicable? Which method is basically going to be more effective for the business? And which method is going to help me achieve the objective of that specific task? And that's the best thing I can basically suggest for you, because guys, costing in finance, it trapas sometimes, but you need to trap back by studying and actually asking yourself the why in every single topic. So and then the last question I was asked is, what is your game plan or study method for the weeks that you studied? I think I touched on the main points so far. But one of the things that I'm going to add is that you need to train your body to be awake during the times you'll be writing. So if you know that the paper starts at 8 and finishes at 12, do not sleep. When you're studying, do not sleep from those hours, because your brain needs to be trained that you need to be awake and effective during this time, right? Because imagine you say, you're a night person, you study at night, and then at night you're a night owl, you're busy opening your book. From 8 o'clock, 12 o'clock, you're sleeping. Guess what? When you're writing, you will be sleepy. So don't make the same mistake that I made, right? Because I'm not a night person, I'm a morning person. So I'll study at 2 in the morning and then take a nap at 8, wake up at 10. It was odd patterns. But then I realized that I would get tired during CTA. And that didn't work for me. So I had to adjust and train my body. So you need to be able to do that as well. And also another tip I can give you is eat proper foods. Don't eat ipapa or amakwinya. You're just going to sleep. So just make sure that you're eating your fruits, you're getting your protein in, you're getting snacks in, and your body is just energized, from the study session, so that you can prepare for the big day that is coming. But yeah, those are the tips that I can give you in terms of the study plan. And also, please take breaks. I know you are stressing. I know you're saying, the exam is around the corner. Please, 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 please do not neglect yourself. Listen to your body. Listen to your body, or else we don't want to burn out. We don't want you to crash. So just make sure that you're listening to your body and you are taking breaks. Drink water, take a walk, but just please, please, please take a break, because we do not want a burnout when you are supposed to be at your peak in terms of studying. So yes, we have reached the end of our episode, and if you still have questions, then do not hesitate to leave the question in the comment section. And if maybe you are a person who has passed your ITC and you're trying to help the fellow IAC candidates, then you can leave a comment in the comment section so you can help a fellow brother and a fellow sister achieve the very same goal that you have. And if you still want additional support on top of this video, then be sure to reach out to me, on the email as well as in the comment section. So I like telling the APC candidates that please start in the comment section by stating your question, because chances are you are not the only person with that question. Let's try to help as many IAC candidates as possible. But yes, just know that you got this, you are capable, you are competent, and you are going to pass the first IAC exam ever. You're going to be part of the statistics that are passing. It doesn't matter the percentage of the pass rate or the former pass rate of 14%. That will not be you in terms of, the failure rate. You're going to be part of the pass rate. Just believe in yourself. You got this, and just go slay, man. And yes, it is goodbye from my side.